Hello, welcome to The Conversation on News Central Television. This is a program where we bring you up to speed with all the political happenings on the African continent. I am Gbenga Aborowa.
And I am Rita Omodia. It's a brand new week, and today on The Conversation, Ivory Coast has accused Bamako of hostage taking and threatened some sanctions over 46 Ivorian soldiers held in Mali for 2 months. We'll also be looking at events in Senegal as West Africa's largest ever proportion of women MPs take their seat in the newly elected legislature. That's a plus, I must say, for Senegal.
Yes, a plus. And when it comes to gender parity in Parliament, you'll be shocked to note that they are actually higher than the United Kingdom and the United States of America. So kudos to women leading in Senegal.
I'm happy you're saying this. Kudos to women leading. I'm happy it's coming from a man.
I'm a champion for women.
Oh my goodness.
Right, yes. And the last time we actually spoke,
the
the sovereign in the United Kingdom was still Queen Elizabeth II. And it's funny how so much can happen in the space of a few days.
With modernity, a lot of people are looking for gender parity, gender equality, where what a man can do, a woman can do.
Yes, so, but
and even do better.
There's a king now, King Charles III.
King Charles III,
yes, and I saw it somewhere that why didn't they replace her with a queen? Who's the new queen? No, it doesn't work like that.
There's also another joke of Charles being called the queen. But anyways, we'll be discussing Ivory Coast and all that later on the program.
Let's begin with the relations between Mali and Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast has threatened sanctions and accused Bamako of hostage taking of 46 soldiers. This comes after laid out conditions for the release of the 46 Ivorian soldiers held in Mali for 2 months. Ivory Coast says the 49 troops were sent on a routine rotation for personnel who provide backup services for the United Nations peacekeeping mission in Mali, otherwise known as MINUSMA, and have called for their release.
Now, diplomatic sources close to the talks say Mali is demanding that Ivory Coast acknowledge its responsibility in the affairs and express its regret for the deployment of the soldiers. Mali's military-led government, however, says the troops had no orders or supporting documents and has described them as mercenaries. The arrest of the soldiers after the arrival at Bamako airport on July 10 has sparked a diplomatic crisis between Mali and its West African neighbor. Now, joining us live for this conversation, we have Oluwaseyi Adeyemo, is the publisher Inside Watch Africa and Public Analytics. Thank you so much for joining us. We also have Mbulle-Nziege Leonard, a political analyst from Cape Town, South Africa. Gentlemen, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I'll begin with Oluwaseyi. Now, how did the detention of these 46 Ivorian soldiers that have been held in Mali come about?
Okay, I mean, like we all know, Mali is one place that one can say is one of the most troubled parts of West Africa. In the past 2 years, they suffered 2 coup d'etats. And obviously, the rest of ECOWAS is seen as the enemy because of the sanctions that were melted against them. And we all know that they've suffered a lot of jihadist insurgency, they have political problems. So anyone around who is dealing with them, particularly from West Africa, should be cautious and be clear about whatever relationship that that West African is sharing with them. I think it was not properly guarded for the Ivorians to have allowed 40 military personnel to have gone into that country without the required documents clearly showing their mission there, considering the frail relationship that exists between Mali at the time and the rest of West Africa because of the sanctions that is being melted against them because of the military rule that is currently there.
Thank you, Oluwaseyi. I'll bring in Leonard here. Now, Leonard, Mali had accused the Ivorians of being mercenaries. They were charged with attempting to harm state security. These are quite serious allegations by any standard. Has the Malian government provided any evidence to back these allegations?
Thank you once more. And as my esteemed colleague already laid the foundation, regarding the deteriorating relation. They started as a result of the double coup that happened in August 2020, and then with the subsequent one that we had last year. And we're at the nadir. We're really at the tip of the iceberg right now, because what you're having is this situation where soldiers have been detained, and the Malian government hasn't necessarily provided any evidence to that end. However, they've taken very serious steps with respect to just maintaining them under their custody, and they've charged them for attempting to undermine state security, as well as conspiracy against the government, and harboring very high-powered weapons in the country without authorization. And there's been a twist to this scenario. It was a
Hello, Leonard. Are you there?
to a statement. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, the president.
Yes.
The president.
Can you backtrack, because we lost you for a few seconds there? You said there's a twist to this. Can you pick up from there?
Yes, there's been a new twist, because on Friday, the Nigerian delegation stipulating that they're willing to release the 46 remaining soldiers in the event that certain political exiles, that is former high-ranking members of the previous regime, which are in exile in Abidjan, are returned to Bamako. So now there's a very big twist to it, and the Ivorian government has called this a sort of a chantage, we're saying.
Okay.
We'll get to that twist, because it's part of what we're going to be discussing as we proceed with the program. Yes. Now, Oluwaseyi, 3 women among the 49 Ivorian soldiers detained in Mali were released by the Malian authorities on the 4th of September. What reason was given for their release?
It was said that it was based on humanitarian grounds. Obviously, the truth of the matter is one cannot really ascertain the actual reason, but they said that the release is based on humanitarian grounds. So let's believe that that was the reason why the women were released to the Togolese, because of course it's the Togolese government that have been the mediator, as it were, between Mali and the Ivorian people.
Okay, let's look at the relationship between Mali and Ivory Coast. Where did it all go wrong, and what reasons can you give to the fracture in diplomatic relations between Mali and Ivory Coast? Oluwaseyi.
All right. Like I said earlier, they're neighbors. Truth of the matter is they've enjoyed a very good relationship, but I believe that the military junta in Mali right now feels ostracized and feels angry, like I said, not just, with Ivory, but every other country in the West African region, because as far as they're concerned, the sanction that is being melted against them is a little bit too harsh. And so they're not happy with the rest of West Africa. In my opinion, as a person, I think we have not even done enough, because the truth is we all have agreed that we're tired of military incursion into power in West Africa. And whatever must be done, and must be done diplomatically and with a lot of seriousness and zeal, must be done to ensure that we do not have any military coup d'etat again in West Africa.
But Oluwaseyi, looking at the history of sanctions, just a quick one before I move to Leonard. Looking at the history of sanctions and using the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic and also the Russia-Ukraine war, we do know that it's the ordinary Malians that are feeling the brunt of these sanctions. Is there no other way to deal with the junta? I mean, you've suspended them from ECOWAS, and they've given their word that 2024 there will be a transition, so as not to hurt the ordinary Malians.
Like I've always said, the problem really with sanctions is that we always wait till there's a problem before we start to go and talk on behalf or intervene in situations like this. It would have been better if, for whatever reason, the reason that was given for the coup d'etat was the fact that the democratic government at the time was not doing well. It would have been appropriate if ECOWAS, for instance, had gotten involved at that time. And they stood against, the democratically elected government and said and sanctioned them as well. So it will be seen as being fair that it is not just against the military. Because at the end of the day, like you rightly pointed out, the most important people in this case are the Ivorians, the people themselves. And so it should not be seen as, so whatever the democratically elected government do is right, and it's only the military that's wrong. So I think that has always been a problem, because ECOWAS and the rest of the world, whether it's UN, EU, would always wait until there's a coup d'etat before they speak out.
Okay, Leonard, over to you. Looking at mediation efforts, the government of Togo has been leading mediation efforts for the release of the remaining Ivorian soldiers. I mean, how is that going? You talked about a twist earlier on. And are there any other parties involved?
The Togolese president has dispatched his foreign affairs minister, Robert Dusi, who has quite sound relations with the Malian traditional government, and in particular, the transition president, Colonel Assimi Goïta. He's done a fairly good job as an intermediary because Togo has privileged.
Okay.
Leonard, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Okay,
Yes,
go on,
ahead,
please.
Yeah. Togo, as I said, has spearheaded it through their foreign affairs minister, but also the United Nations has also been very much involved in this. President Ouattara has been discussing with Antonio Gutierrez, and the SGA, Madam Amina Mohamed, also paid a visit to Cote d'Ivoire in order to see into how the organization could play a bigger role with respect to securing the release of the soldiers. ECOWAS is supposed to have this as one of their main topics in the next summit, which they have on 23rd of September, with respect to the political situations in Mali and Guinea. And Nigeria also has come to the table dispatch of a diplomatic mission on 9th of September, wherein the Malian traditional government expressed their desire for the political exiles who are resident in Abidjan to be returned in order to secure the release of the soldiers. Burkina Faso, Paul Damiba, the
head of the junta in Burkina Faso,
of recent, and spoke about his desire to also play a role in securing the release of the soldiers. So Cote d'Ivoire is not alone with respect to their desire to obtain the liberty of these soldiers, but then it's becoming extremely complicated despite the interest that many international and regional stakeholders have shown in this current matter.
Thank you, Leonard. Now, Oluwaseyi, according to the Ivorian government, the soldiers were deployed as part of a security and logistics support contract signed with the United Nations peacekeeping mission in Mali, MINUSMA, in July 2019. So, I mean, naturally, if somebody accuses you of being X, you would meet the accused and you ask them, you verify with the United Nations. Has the United Nations or MINUSMA verified this claim that these Ivorian soldiers were part of the MINUSMA mission?
I mean, just 3 days after, the spokesperson of MINUSMA spoke, and I learned that because of what he said, he has actually been asked to leave Mali, Bamako specifically. And so, yes, they've spoken. And of course, they also went too clear because they said, yes, it do not directly belong to the UN troop, but they, on a routine basis, they have deployment from different countries, to sort of assist in the exercise. And you see, again, that for me is the reason why all of this is being played on, because a couple of gray areas that is not.
So, I mean, it feels like, sorry to butt in here, it feels like the spokesperson, the erstwhile spokesperson, just threw the Ivorians under the bus. But looking at your experience in geopolitics and international relations in the ECOWAS region, do you think they were really here to destabilize the Malian government, or the Malian junta is just making a mountain out of a molehill?
It will be very difficult for you to fly into a country's airport and want to go and destabilize it. I mean, that in itself is like committing suicide. I mean, because, of course, like they've been arrested, they'll be arrested. So that in itself shows the fact that obviously they went there for that purpose. Because if they were coming for that purpose, they obviously will come through the border, and they will come in a way that they will not be noticed, that they're coming in. So you're not going to board a plane and land at the country's airport, the international airport, to go and stabilize that country. That in itself is not the way to go about stabilizing any country. So, like I said, there's a trade relationship, and obviously, I think they would have been more careful in the way they go about whatever intervention they were willing to do, because you also cannot throw out the fact that you could come as, coming to support or help, and then do a job around, gathering intelligence, against the country. That also cannot be completely ruled out. I mean, it's not like everybody that comes to do, peacekeeping mission. Some of them are there also to gather intelligence. So that cannot be completely ruled out.
Okay, Leonard, contradictory messages going on there. We see Mali, we see the UN mission MINUSMA, all giving contradictory messages. But now the diplomatic sources say Mali is demanding that Ivory Coast acknowledge its responsibility in the affair and express its regret for the deployment of the soldiers. Now, earlier on, you also mentioned that Bamako also wants Abidjan to hand over people who have been on its territory since 2013 who are wanted in Mali. I wonder what has been the response from Ivory Coast?
As Oluwaseyi noted, it's very, very difficult, would I even say impossible, for a country like Cote d'Ivoire to
Leonard?
Hello?
At present, they have more than 600 Ivorian troops who are part of the MINUSMA, irrespective of this current situation at hand. And as he's spoken, it's probably ulterior motives. And the recent request to have the political exiles, and they're very important individuals. You have the former Prime Minister, Boubou Cissé. You have the former Minister the former President Karim Keita, who have been requested to be sent back to Mali. So at this point in time, the Ivorian authorities have said it's a blackmail. They can't be using the Ivorian soldiers as pawns.
Well, if Ivory Coast refuses to release them, do you think they will also get their people back? As it's more like a change of personnel. Do you think that's going to happen, Leonard?
Well, at this point in time, President Ouattara has behaved. He has acted in a very mature manner. He has decided to play the diplomatic card because there are 3 million Malians resident in Cote d'Ivoire. If he wanted to take a Cote d'Ivoire is the main source of merchandise that gets to Bamako, to Mali, because it's landlocked. However, at this point in time, I think we're still going to see how much the diplomatic card can be played out, because there is a lot of pressure.
Okay, Leonard, we'll get back to you shortly. We seem to be having connection issues. I would like to know what Oluwaseyi makes of this somewhat quid pro quo deal. You have a situation where the Malian junta is asking for the return of exiles in Ivorian territory for an exchange of their 46 soldiers now. What do you make of all of this? The Ivorian authorities have said, no, we're not going to budge. So how do you see this playing out?
Okay, like Leonard was trying to establish, I mean, so you have a country, or you have two countries who have, a very long history. They have a lot of things that they share together. They share importation together. A lot of families are connected on both sides. And obviously, what you can do, and it's unfortunate that I'm going to use this opportunity to also speak to our leaders in Africa, specifically now in West Africa, that when they do not do their job as the diplomats they really are, you're affecting, the individual, because at the end of the day, our ties are too strong, for us to just bring it on the table and say, oh, give that, take this. There's too many undercurrents. There's too many connections as the family, as by economy, as by a lot of things. We're tied to ourselves. I mean, that is the real fact. So the only option that is open to us now is diplomacy. And I just pray that both leaders would be reasonable in the way to go about it so that these are
I also want to know what the junta's interest is in these exiles, because they weren't even in government in 2013. So why do they want them to return to Mali so bad?
That would only be answered by them, because so it's no reason why they want all of these people. They've been out of the country since 2013, and that's like a while. I mean, I don't really understand why they're insisting that they want them now, some 9 years after. I really do not understand what they will do with them, if they have them physically back in the country. Maybe they're just using it as an excuse to hold back, or to say that, they have some level of negotiating power against the ECOWAS. Because at the end of the day, I do not want to rule out the fact that this is not just targeted at Ivory Coast, it's targeted at ECOWAS at large, saying to them, stop meddling to our personal affairs, as we go forward.
Okay, Oluwaseyi, talking about diplomacy, it seems like the two sides now are being strong on their demands. Let's bring in ECOWAS, which you just mentioned now. An extraordinary summit of the Community of West African States, ECOWAS, is to be held next week, 23rd of September, in New York, on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. Now, Leonard said these are some of the issues that will be discussed. But do you believe that these issues will be discussed? And if they are discussed, what exactly will the ECOWAS do to intervene in the matter?
It will obviously be discussed, because it's definitely top of the mind for everyone now. West Africa, every West African is concerned with the situation in that is happening right now. So it will be discussed. Now, the thing is, again, what we use this opportunity to plead to our leaders in ECOWAS to, when they come, to the table to discuss matters like this, they bring equity to the table. They're fair in the way they go about negotiating. Because if it's seen that you're tilting to a side and you come to the table siding a particular party against the other party, you're likely to be faced with oppositions and restrictions. So it will be nice that this is being discussed, that they're very clear in the way they negotiate and the things they bring to the table, showing that they are very equitable in the things they're demanding, and the interest of the larger society and everyone is what is at their mind. And if you do that the way you negotiate, obviously you will get the best out of a negotiation like it.
Thank you, Oluwaseyi. Leonard, just a short while ago, we did ask Oluwaseyi what the interest was of the Malian junta in this exiles in Ivory Coast since 2013. 9 years is quite a long time ago, and I'm not sure if you have a direct line to Colonel Assimi Goita in Bamako to tell us what is really going on and what is the junta's interest in this exiles, and why do they want them back in Bamako?
A direct line with him, but I do have direct lines with colleagues and friends in Abidjan. And with the case of individuals like Karim Keita and Mbulle-Nziege, the former prime minister, they're actually recent exiles. They were there just after the coup. And the issue with Karim Keita, he was one of the regime's most prominent figures. He was a parliamentarian, and he was the head of the Defense Commission. So a lot of military contracts passed through him. There were suspicions that he wanted as president one day, and Mbulle-Nziege, at present, he still has political ambitions. So I think, targeting those individuals is, trying to ruffle their feathers. But then also, I think they're also trying to, get one up on President Ouattara, because he took a very hard line stance when the military transition government undertook the coup. He was at the forefront of, pushing for sanctions, and they were very, very unhappy about this. You have to.
So, Leonard, you feel it's more like a revenge?
Also, in the ideological sense, Mali is aligned with Russia, and then we've seen the complete fallout that they've had with France. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Ouattara is regarded as France's man in the region. So, there are a lot of underlying currents. There's, the domestic players at hand. There are also the personal rivalries. And you can also look at the ideological as well as the diplomatic stance, whose side the other has been, aligning.
So, Colonel Asimi Goita does have a lot of sour grapes with the Ivorian authorities. Now, I'm happy you mentioned the relations with France, and Colonel Asimi Goita seems to be getting one back. But let's look at the whole picture. A lot has changed in the last 8 months. Operation Berkane, which was the French operation to fight insurgents and extremists, violent extremists in the Sahel. The Malians, they disengaged from Mali. And then they brought in the Russians, the Wagner group. How have they been able to keep the peace so far? And has the situation improved in Mali from when the French departed? Or are they filling a gap in the security infrastructure?
There's definitely a gap. I mean, we all have to acknowledge that the Operation Berkane was not fulfilling its mission of stabilizing the country. The conceptualization, multi-national missions to take unilateral decisions, and that angered the Malian authorities. But then, since their departure, the situation hasn't improved. On a daily basis, we hear, reports of massacres, Malian soldiers being killed, civilians as well. And there's a noteworthy gap. And despite the, nationalist sentiment.
Leonard, can you hear us?
A follow-up in terms of results on the ground, which would prove that the French departure was positive for the Malian authorities and their desire or their intention to combat the, the terrorist insurgency. And, it's very, very difficult at this point in time because Mali has alienated a lot of groups which could have helped them. Even the G5 Sahel, the G5 Sahel,
Okay, Oluwaseyi, I'd like you to pick that up from where Leonard dropped. Now, he mentioned that the security situations is not still favorable in Mali with the departure of the French forces, Operation Berkane and all that. And right now, Mali's junta has promised that elections will definitely hold in 2024. I mean, if you would agree that security situation in Mali is deteriorating, do you believe that elections will definitely hold in 2024 in Mali?
I think all of us have always agreed that military option is definitely not option. I mean, it's unfortunate that when the civilians get the opportunity to do the thing, to do the right, they always do the wrong, and they, one way or the other, force back the military hands into power. You can't trust the military because then at the end of the day, they never do it right because they were not trained to rule the people. They were trained to protect the people. And so whatever they do, they're just playing it by the hair. They're just improvising. And so you would definitely never have a situation where a military junta is able to give us the kind of security we want in our country, whether it's West Africa or the rest of Africa. So they're definitely having a military junta as head of state is definitely not an option that we all want. So we, at this point, we can only hope and pray that he would be true to his promise and allow the election to hold, and we can go back to a democratic arrangement. But unfortunately, again, I like to repeat, they also have a way of disappointing us, and they've done that across West Africa and Africa, and we pray that they do their jobs well so that will not have a reoccurrence.
And this is where I'd like to jump in, because it's almost like I'm happy you're not giving the civilian administrations a get out of jail free card, because this is one of the reasons why it's become a deja vu and a vicious cycle. You have the civilians and the military comes in, the people welcome them as liberators, they overstay, and then you come back to elections. West Africa has been known as the coup belt, and we're seeing a resurgence of that with coups in Mali and Burkina Faso. You also have, I'm happy you mentioned it earlier, you have a situation where civilians are not doing what they're elected for. Some of them break constitutional term limits, like what we saw in Guinea and in other parts of Africa. And then you suggested ECOWAS should come in at the point of civilians, and maybe sanction them and all of that. But wouldn't that be interfering in the domestic affairs of this sovereign nation? So how do you balance good governance and at the same time, how do you keep the military at bay?
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity again, because I look forward to opportunities like this to bear some of the things that worry me. So we all say that we're passionate at democracy, after the Europeans and United Kingdom and the rest of them. Now you have a situation where they are able to have a situation where they have a robust government, where you have people in the parliament ending up becoming prime minister, and even if they leave office, they can go back. Then you have a proper way of seamless handing over and taking over. You see what just happened in the United Kingdom, where one prime minister is leaving office, the other is taking it over, and all of that. Now we should find a way. If ECOWAS is going to help us, let them help us. They should not wait until there's a coup d'etat, because it is obvious that the structure of government that we have now is faulty. One that whoever becomes president, whether democratically elected or not, becomes, the dictator at the end of the day. He decides on what happens. He wakes up one day and extends his time in office and say, oh no, the 2 terms is not enough for me. I want to go on the 3rd, 4th, 5th term. And those are things we need to clearly correct, because human beings all over the world are not to be trusted. And that's why it is said in democracy that, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So it's about the structure. It's about making sure that these things are properly organized. And it's ECOWAS that is the overseeing organization at this time to step and speak directly and clearly about it. And say, guys, let's come to the table. Let's stop deceiving ourselves. It's not about the military or the civilian. It's about the fact that all of us are making a mistake and we're not doing this right as we ought to do it. We're not checking ourselves as we ought to check. We are not able to speak to ourselves directly as we ought to speak to ourselves, because if you leave human beings and give them too much power, they will always make the kind of mistakes that they are making now. And they will, they turn us back 10 years, 15 years back. And that's why we keep dealing with all the problems we're dealing with. Because all of this, we're not talking about the fact that this makes the economy, to go into shambles. And the people are poor, they're suffering, they're not only being killed, being raped and all of that, they can't feed themselves. You can't have a situation where, the average Malian, is able to have a 3 square meal. So this, cuts across our lives, and we then deal decisively and clearly with our leadership. And ECOWAS, again, is going to help us. Please, they must speak directly and clearly to us.
Okay, now Oluwaseyi, all accusing fingers are pointing towards ECOWAS not doing enough. Now, would you employ the use of sanctions? Now, a lot of people they'll say that sanctions, that most countries have gone past sanctions, and it only brings a negative effect on the people and not the people who actually are doing the wrong things. Now, do you think ECOWAS should go past the use of sanctions?
Oh, obviously, that's what I'm saying. It's not just sanctions. It's about talking. It's about really helping out to really fashion out what structure that will work for us. For instance, UK Parliament really intrigues me. The fact that the Prime Minister goes into the House, is there seated on the floor of the House, he speaks to the Speaker. That in itself is a check. You have what they call the cabinet, the shadow cabinet, where the opposition is able to challenge everything. They have minister of this on this side, they have minister of that on the other side as well. So there's a constant and continuous check on the system. So the kind of system where we run cannot bring any good result. That's the truth. Because nobody's checking anybody. The moment you win is like the winner takes all. And that we discuss at country level, at the regional level, the ECOWAS, and even at the continental level with AU. So that at the end of the day, we get right. Because it's like we just jumped on the train and we were not really ready for all of this. And we're running a very, very poor system that will not bring the kind of results that we all desire.
Thank you, Oluwaseyi. I'll let Leonard have the final word here. ECOWAS is, for lack of a better word, obsessed with elections in Mali. They want the transition to happen as fast as it can so they can return to democratic rule. We know what the current situation in the Sahel and Mali is right now. Some of these violent extremists are even spreading to West African coastal states that have never seen this sort of violence before. Just last week, the Togolese government, the Beninois government was in talks with the Rwandan Defense Forces to have troops move to its northern part of the country. So it shows you how serious it is. Should ECOWAS focus on, my question is this, is democracy the silver bullet in elections that will solve all Mali's problems? And what should we really focus on, security or elections for Mali? Leonard?
I think that they go hand in glove. One can't be helped. One can't be pursued. They can't be pursued exclusively. They can be pursued concurrently, because now without is poor governance and illegitimate leaders who are breaking democratic principles that cause these coups and military takeovers to occur. So now we need to have all of these resolved concurrently. The problem is you have institutions like ECOWAS, and I always say institutions like ECOWAS, African Union, down here in Southern Africa, SADC, they're more like a trade union is to support your members irrespective of what's going on. So you have situations like in Mali, whereby you had the former president, late Boubacar Keita, Macky Sall, even though he's in charge of one of the most established democracies on the continent in Senegal, he was probably having his third-term ambitions as well. In Togo, it's the same thing with Nyasimbe. It's a family dynasty there. So it's very, very difficult for them to.
Okay, I think Leonard is basically talking about security and elections being hand in hand. For you to have elections, there has to be security. I'll take that question back to Oluwaseyi. I mean, okay, Oluwaseyi is not still with us.
Yeah, and I believe this is where we drop the anchor on this topic, and then we switch gears and move to Senegal. But before we do that, I'd like to say a big thank you to Oluwaseyi Adeyemo, publisher, Inside Watch Africa, and political analyst. I'd also like to say thank you to Leonard Mbulle-Nziege. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the conversation. We do appreciate your insights and contribution. You're watching The Conversation on News Central Television. We'll go on a quick break, and when we come back in the second half of the program, we'll be looking at women power in Senegal as the Senegalese female members of parliament will be sworn in this week as they resume their duties. Just stay with us. The conversation will be right back shortly. You're welcome back to The Conversation, and it's time for us to switch gears into discussion for our second topic. Now, Senegal hopes to break new ground as West Africa's largest ever proportion of women members of parliament, with more than 44% of seats in Senegal's next assembly to be held by women. In 2006, Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf became the first female head of state in Africa.
Since then, many national and regional gender policies in West Africa have sought to achieve gender equality, increase women's participation in decision-making, and expand women's economic opportunities. Luckily, 73 out of 165 parliamentary seats will be held by women following elections in July across Senegal. But the question is, how easy will it be in a country perceived to be controlled by patriarchal laws and attitudes? Well, to discuss this, we have joining us Abdulateef Ahmed, Head of Research and Monitoring Desk at News Central TV. Thank you so much, Abdulateef, for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
So, according to Geneva-based organization, the Inter-Parliamentary Union, Senegal ranks 4th in Africa and 18th in the world for gender parity in parliament. What do you think attributed to this wonderful position, so to say?
Okay, Senegal's progress today has a history. There's an antecedent from the way women galvanized themselves in the early 1990 to 1994, when women who felt they were out of the political dynamics of the country put themselves together in what they called COSEF, and decided to champion women's rights and women's participation and inclusiveness in politics. And it was after that that we started having more inclusion. And you have the likes of former President Abdoulaye Wade, who advocated 50% inclusion of women in participatory democracy. He did advocate that in Durban in 2002 when he addressed the AU. Beyond that, he was intentional about having women participate in governance. And the current president relied on what existed and broadened the space so that it jumped from a paltry 16% to what we now have as about 44%.
Now, Latif, a former Prime Minister and incoming Member of Parliament for the incumbent President Macky Sall's APR party, Aminata Toure, says female pioneers in politics always encounter resistance and suspicion. Where in 2022, are there still men that push back when they see women in politics? And how true is this? Is there still suspicion and pushback?
Usually, it is seen that women are the cradle of the home, and it is assumed that they should not be seen publicly, legislating, representing people, and all of that. However, the truth of the matter is you cannot ask for votes from 50% of the population, and then when it comes to decision making, you will decide that they do not participate in governance. So democracy is about the right to vote and the right to be voted for, and the suspicions are misplaced. Men could have meetings into the night and nobody will raise eyebrows. But when women have meetings into the night, there's a fear that they may be doing things that are not necessarily political. So,
is this suspicion unique to Senegal alone, or it's Africa-wide?
Not at all. It's broad-based. It cuts across a lot of regions across the continent and even outside the continent. However, what we have realized is countries that have continued to involve women in participatory democracy have been seen to be more stable. You will have seen by now, for example, that Senegal is the bastion of democracy on the continent. It's one of the most stable, and it has inclusion of women in governance. Now, compare that to Burkina Faso, where women are required to pay as much as 3.5 million to be involved in participatory electioneering, and that takes them out of likelihood that they will be elected, and the fact that they do not get party support sometimes. So you have Burkina Faso is slightly unstable. It's having a lot of economic and social challenges because those who form the critical component of the population are exempted out of decision making because of their gender.
But do you think education and religion still plays a major role when you talk about women participating in politics?
Yes, it does. A lot of religious concerns are always adduced to the reason why women should not be seen involved in decision making. However, when you look at what obtains elsewhere, the best practices across the world and what is available, women must be involved in the entire process of governance because there are inclusive laws that include women and ensure that they are able to participate not just in politics, but in running the country from the home to the public spaces.
Thank you very much, Latif Ahmed. I'm afraid this is where we're going to have to leave it on today's edition of The Conversation. Thank you very much for your time
Thank you for having
contribution. Okay, this is where we drop the anchor on today's edition of The Conversation. In the first half, we look at the diplomatic spat between Mali and Ivory Coast, with the Ivorian authorities saying that the Malian government is blaming it for the kidnap or the abduction of 46, the detention of 46 Ivorian soldiers that were detained in Mali for the past 2 months. And we just concluded our conversation on Senegal, where the country will be swearing in its highest proportion of female parliamentarians.
I'm Rita Omodia. Join us again on Wednesday for another edition of The Conversation.
And I'm Gbenga Aborowa. Bye-bye.